Today we will be covering Lesson 5.6, Dividing Rational Numbers. Our learning goals for today: let's divide signed numbers. You are currently watching the lesson walkthrough video. You may also look at the Unit 5 video support introduction videos for more help. Warm-up. Tell me your sign. Please pause the video here and attempt the warm-up. Consider the equation -5 times x equals -35. Is the solution x to this equation positive or negative? What is the solution x to this equation? One way to start coming up with if the solution will be positive or negative is to think if we are doing -5 plus -5, or if we're starting to do -5 minus -5. -5 plus -5, those both have the same sign, so they're going to go the same direction, which means we add their magnitudes. So when I add two negative numbers, then I become more negative. -5 minus -5 is really going to be taking away a negative, which adds a positive value. So we end up with -5 plus 5. Because our arrows are going opposite directions, they counteract each other. So we look for the difference between their magnitudes. Okay, so neither one of these equals -35, but we can tell that if we are adding the negatives, we become more negative. If we are subtracting a negative, we get closer to 0 or more to the positive side. Okay, so if we are going from -5 on our number line, and we are trying to go to -35, we are becoming more negative. This means that we are adding, so the solution is going to be a positive. To find the solution, I like to think of how our numbers are related in a fact family triangle. So we are looking at -5 times x equals -35. So -5 times x is multiplication, so our fact family is going to be a multiplication and division fact family. We have -5 times x equals -35. So that means I need to take -35 divided by -5 to find x. So -35 divided by -5. We already know the answer is going to be a positive, so we're going to look at 35 divided by 5 is going to be equal to 7. Let's take a closer look at why -35 divided by -5 equals positive 7. One good habit to get into when we're dealing with negatives is to put your negative number into parentheses so you keep the negative sign with the correct value or the correct magnitude. So let's take a look at -35 divided by -5 equals 7. Now from our work with constants of proportionality and fractions, we know that dividing by a number is really the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I can actually rewrite this problem as -35 times -1/5 equals 7. Now a negative can be written as a positive number times -1. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this as -35 being equal to -1 times positive 35. And -1/5 as being -1 times positive 1/5. Okay, now you can see that I only have multiplication in this new equation. So that means I can use my commutative and associative properties and I can rearrange my numbers. So let's go ahead and take our 35 and our 1/5 and let's go ahead and move those to the beginning. So we have 35 times 1/5 times -1, and then times -1 again, equals +7. 35 times 1/5 is going to give you 35/5, which is really equal to 7. And when we multiply by -1, we get -7. And when we multiply by -1 again, we get +7. So when you are multiplying by two negatives, it's like multiplying by -1 twice, which gives you a positive number. Multiplication and division. Find the missing values in each equation. Rewrite the unknown factor problems as division problems. This is going to combine our knowledge of fact families and how multiplication and division are related, as well as knowing what multiplying by -1 does. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example over to the top right. It's pretty simple. If you are multiplying by -1, it reverses your sign. So we have 5 times -1 would equal -5. -5 times -1 equals +5. So when you multiply by -1, you are reversing the sign. So if it's positive, it becomes a negative when you multiply by -1. If it's a negative and you multiply by -1, it becomes a positive. Please take a moment and pause and attempt to fill in the table, and then unpause when you are ready to check your answers. Let's take a look at the first row. It says -3 times -4 equals question mark. So I'm going to go ahead and at the top, I'm going to rewrite that equation. -3 times -4 equals question mark. Okay, so -3 can be rewritten as -1 times 3. You can see I put it in parentheses so that I know that -1 times 3 is equal to -3. Okay, and -4 is really equal to -1 times 4. Okay, so when we are looking for the missing value, we have 3 times 4, which is 12, times -1, which becomes -12, times -1 again, which leaves us with +12. You can see that there's not a division equation there because the missing value was already going to be the product in this multiplication equation. For the next equation, I'm going to use a fact family triangle so we can look at how these numbers would be related as a division problem. So you can see where they found that division equation. So the original multiplication equation was that -3 times a number equaled 12. Now multiplication and division are inverses, so we have a multiplication and division fact family. So -3 times a number equals 12. So that means we can find our answer by doing 12 divided by -3. And that's where that division equation came from. Okay, so let's go back to our fact family. You can see that the missing value for the multiplication problem of -3 times a number equals 12 is going to be the same missing value as 12 divided by -3. I'm going to rewrite the equation 12 divided by -3 as the multiplication of a reciprocal that we learned about when we talked about fractions, constant of proportionality, and scale factors. Okay, so I can really rewrite this as 12 times -1/3. So we have 12 times 1/3 times -1. That's what makes our -1/3 a negative, is because we multiplied it by -1. So 12 times 1/3 is the same as 12 divided by 3. So we get 4 there. So 4 times -1 is going to be equal to -4. So the missing value on both of those equations in that second row that we were solving are going to be -4. So a negative times a negative equals a positive, and a negative times a positive equals a negative. Three times a number equals 12. So 3 times a number equals 12. Remember, multiplication and division are inverses. So if 3 times a number equals 12, then 12 divided by 3 equals that number. So that gives us our division equation. And 12 divided by 3 is equal to 4. And 3 times 4 does equal 12. So that completes our fact family triangle. 12 divided by 3 equals 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. And 4 times 3 is 12. A number times -4 equals 12. So a number times -4 equals 12. That means 12 divided by -4 equals that missing number. Okay, so again, we have 12 divided by -4. We have one negative, so we're going to multiply by -1 one time, which means we're going to have a negative value. Okay, so 12 divided by 4 is equal to 3. So in this problem, we're going to equal -3. Okay, so a reason that happens is we are, again, multiplying by the reciprocal. So we're multiplying by -1/4, which is really equal to 1/4 times -1. So we went ahead and found 12 times 1/4, which was 3, and then we multiplied by -1, which changed the sign, and that's how we got -3. A number times 4 equals +12, which means 12 divided by 4 would equal that missing number. Both of those numbers are positive, so we don't have any opposite signs to take. So we're going to do 12 divided by 4, which is +3. Multiplication and division. Complete the following sentences with either positive or negative. The sign of a positive number divided by a positive number is always. The sign of a positive number divided by a negative number is always. The sign of a negative number divided by a positive number is always. And the sign of a negative number divided by a negative number is always. Please take a moment and attempt this before moving on. Over to the right, I've drawn 3 fact family triangles to show what happens when you multiply and divide positive and negative numbers. Now, when you are dealing with negatives and multiplication and division, remember that multiplying by -1 makes it the opposite sign. So for a positive number to happen with 2 negatives, you have to have 2 negatives. Okay, so you'll see that in my top triangle, they're all positive. The next triangle, I have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. And at the bottom, we have a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So on A, the sign of a positive number divided by a positive number is always positive. That can be shown in the first fact family triangle. The sign of a positive number divided by a negative number, so down in that last family triangle, it's going to be a negative. To get a positive, I have to have two negatives because they have to counteract each other. So times -1, which reverses it, and then times -1 again, which reverses it back to a positive. The sign of a negative number divided by a positive number is always going to be a negative. That can be seen in the second fact family triangle. And the sign of a negative number divided by a negative number, which is in that same number 2 fact family triangle, is going to be a positive. Han and Claire walk towards each other at a constant rate, meet up, and then continue past each other in opposite directions. We will call the position where they meet up 0 feet and the time when they meet up 0 seconds. Han's velocity is 4 feet per second, and Claire's velocity is -5 feet per second. Please pause the video here and make an attempt before you move on. All right, where is each person 10 seconds before they meet up? To help me solve this, I'm going to start with just a simplified number line. I'm going to have 0, which is where they meet up, and at the time when they meet up. Okay, Claire is going -5 feet per second, so Claire is going the negative direction. And Han is 4 feet per second, so Han is going to the positive direction. It says, where is each person 10 seconds before they meet up? So 10 seconds before they meet up is going to be -10 seconds.
Good morning.
-10 seconds. Okay, so if they are meeting at 0 seconds, then before they met up, since Claire's going to the negative direction, before they met up, she was going the positive direction. And before they met up, Han was in the negative direction. Okay, now we're going to show that using an equation. So we have Han's velocity is 4 feet per second, and he went -10 seconds. So 4 times -10. So 4 times 10 is 40, and then we multiplied by -1 one time because there's one negative in this equation. So 4 times -10 is -40, so he's at -40 feet at -10 seconds before they meet, or 10 seconds before they meet. Claire was going -5 feet per second, and so at -10 seconds, she was at -5 times -10. So we multiplied by -1, and then we multiplied by -1 again. So we're going to end up with a positive number. -5 times -10 is positive 50. So 50 feet is where she was at 10 seconds before they met. At the top of this slide, I have drawn the fact family triangle that we are using to solve this. So rate times time equals distance. So distance divided by rate equals time, and distance divided by time equals rate. You can also start with an equation to help you solve this. So Han was going 4 feet per second. So 4 times time equals the position or distance of -10. So that means that his time was -10 divided by 4 because of that fact family triangle. 10 to the negative divided by 4 equals -2.5. 5 seconds. So this is 2.5 seconds before they met, because 0 was defined as when they met up. Now Claire had a rate of negative 5 feet per second. So her rate times her time is going to equal the distance of negative 10. Okay, so to solve that, we're going to take negative 10 divided by negative 5. So a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So she was at negative 10 feet from the meeting place at 2 seconds, which means 2 seconds after they met up. Drilling down. A water well drilling rig has dug to a height of negative 60 feet after 1 full day of continuous use. Assuming the rig drilled at a constant rate, what was the height of the drill after 15 hours? If the rig has been running constantly and is currently at a height of negative 147.5 feet, for how long has the rig been running? And at this rate, how many hours will it take until the drill reaches 250 feet? Please pause and attempt this before moving on. Reviewing this problem, it says that it was at negative 60 feet after 1 full day of continuous use, but the other problems talk about hours, so we need to figure out how we're going to go from the amount in a full day to the amount in an hour. Okay, so there are 24 hours in a day, so we need to divide that full day's amount by 24. So we're going to take negative 60 and we're going to divide by 24. Which gives us negative 2.5 feet per hour. These problems are going to continue using our fact family for distance equals rate times time, which means that distance divided by rate equals time, distance divided by time equals rate. Okay, so assuming the rig drilled at a constant rate, what was the height of the drill after 15 hours? So we have the rate, which was negative 2.5, and we have the time. So you can see in our fact family, we're going to multiply those. So if every hour we are doing negative 2.5 feet, and we do that for 15 hours, we get negative 37.5 feet as the distance or position. If the rig has been running constantly and is currently at a height of negative 147.5 feet, for how long has the rig been running? So now we have the rate, which is negative 2.5. We do not know the time yet, so we're going to use a variable, and it equals the distance of negative 147.5. Okay, so if I put that into my fact family again, negative 2.5 times the time is equal to negative 147.5. So negative 147.5 divided by negative 2.5 is going to give you 59 hours. Now, because these are ratios, you can also still use a ratio table. Okay, at this rate, how many hours will it take until the drill reaches negative 250 feet? So we still have the rate, which is negative 2.5. This problem we still don't have the time for. So we're going to use a variable there, and we're looking at negative 250. Okay, so to find t is going to equal negative 250 divided by negative 2.5. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 250 divided by 2.5 gives you 100. So 100 hours is how long it would take to reach negative 250 feet. Lesson synthesis. Recall that we can write a division problem as a multiplication problem. A positive divided by a negative is a negative divided by a positive is negative, and a negative divided by a negative is positive.